Hello and welcome to Let's Talk F1 2015. Today for the Bahrain Grand Prix. This is a year-long series where we're going to be doing aerodynamic analysis and just general analysis of the free practice sessions ahead of the race weekends for every single race in this season. As I just said, today is the Bahrain Grand Prix. Obviously, the second time we're under the floodlights for the Bahrain Grand Prix. And not too much action in free practice 1, obviously, in Bahrain, with the night race being, in the afternoon, free practice 1 still in the morning. Therefore, free practice 1, the temperatures, the amount of sunlight, the dust as well. Free practice 1 just isn't very useful to any of the teams. So free practice 1 was quite quiet in terms of actual outright pace and kind of actual tyre kind of knowledge. They were just kind of doing aero analysis and just kind of pushing the cars and seeing what was possible. Maybe to get a bit of data for Spain. Any data is good data for here in Formula 1. And certainly for McLaren, that was quite a helpful thing. We saw McLaren in free practice 1, Alonso. Looks like they turned up the wick finally a little bit on the Honda power unit. And Alonso was briefly first place in the timesheets for a few seconds, literally. But still a good overall day, I guess, in session for them because they finished up in 7th place for Fernando Alonso, although Jenson Button had the complete opposite, where his car stalled in the first lap he did, and that was a huge problem for McLaren. But generally a quite quiet free practice 1, but plenty of stuff to talk about in free practice 2 and just a few tech updates. So that's what we'll be going through today. We're going to be starting with Ferrari. So Ferrari, quite a promising Friday for them in a free practice 1. They finished with a 1-2, but as I said, free practice 1 very, very useless really here in Bahrain. Mercedes really didn't even bother running and didn't really show up in free practice 1. But then in free practice 2, if we go on to look at that, Kimi Räikkönen finishing in 3rd and Sebastian Vettel in 4th. So again, just like China, solidly behind the Mercedes. But the interesting to note is when you look at the timings on the pace on the soft tyres, it looks like Ferrari actually have a lot less degradation than the Mercedes, and generally if you look at the general pace, it looks like Ferrari are actually a little bit faster in the first few laps of their stints. So that might be quite important for the race on Sunday, because if the Ferraris can really use their outlap, their in-lap, and kind of the first few laps of their new stint, and if they do a bit of an undercut, it could be quite helpful for Ferrari to maybe jump the Mercedes, maybe one of them. I still, to be honest, think that Mercedes have the pace around here in Bahrain. They look very good, very planted through some of the sectors in Sector 1, Sector 2, and 3, indeed. Especially Sector 2, where you have that kind of really tight left-hander where it's very easy to lock up and brake on your left tyre. And then through Sector 3, where you got those swooping corners left and right quickly. Mercedes look very planted there. So I still think they have the overall outright pace, obviously. And I think Mercedes will be looking very good for a 1-2, but you know what? I wouldn't put it past Ferrari maybe jumping one of the Mercedes. Maybe if, again, Rosberg is put off again, maybe he could get jumped by Sebastian Vettel or Kimi Räikkönen, indeed. Räikkönen always goes well here at Bahrain. It's a solid track for him. And I guess it was a very decent free practice compared to other ones he's had this season and previous seasons. Generally, Kimi has had some torrid free practices, but this Friday's was okay for him. And I think maybe he or Sebastian Vettel could maybe jump Nico Rosberg in 2nd place, or indeed Lewis Hamilton, because indeed Rosberg finished 1st and Hamilton 2nd in free practice 2, which is I'm not sure. Don't quote me because I might be wrong here. I think this is the first time Rosberg's finished ahead of Hamilton in a practice session, or at least free practice 2. So that's quite a good thing for Rosberg in terms of his kind of going forward into qualifying and the race. So I'm not too sure. It's Rosberg obviously got pole here last year, and they had that brilliant duel, but Hamilton came out once again on top last year. So it's going to be very interesting, but I do think the Ferraris could maybe jump one of those Mercs. No real any tech updates to kind of tell you about on the Ferrari. I mean, we've been getting a few rumours that they're bringing some big updates in Spain, which is to be kind of expected. I think the Spanish Grand Prix, guys, watch out for the Let's Talk for the Spanish Grand Prix, because that will be a huge one. Lots of tech updates when we come to Europe, but just rumours of Ferrari bringing some mega different packages to Spain, including maybe even a nose. So the Ferrari nose may be changing for Spain. I don't know. It's just a little rumour there. But no other huge kind of tech updates for Ferrari there. So we're going to move on to McLaren now. So I said McLaren obviously had a good day in free practice 1 in terms of Alonso's side of the garage. They cranked up the engine. They're going to be cranking up the engine for the Bahrain Grand Prix compared to the Chinese one. So you will be seeing maybe, hopefully, some performance gains from McLaren. Definitely Fernando Alonso getting 1st place for a few seconds, and then eventually what was 7th place in free practice 1 was quite rewarding for them, I guess. Obviously, conditions very different when we get to free practice practice 2, which is a lot more like qualifying in the race. Fernando Alonso finished up in 12th, which is still closer to the top 10 than he's ever got before in free practice sessions. So you have to say that McLaren maybe are improving, but on the flip side, once again, a torrid time for Jenson Button. Really had a very tough day in Friday practice, stalling. The car stalled itself as he went into the first corner for his first flying lap in free practice 1. Kind of stalled, and then he turned in, and the car, obviously because it stalled, really didn't have any sort of power or kind of downforce with it, and kind of just spun around. And then in free practice 2, had some issues with the power unit. They're having to change a few things, and he only got a few laps under his belt at the very end of the session. But in general, I think McLaren are improving a little bit. They're learning a lot more about the power unit as they go on. And the biggest thing was that they said there won't be any huge gains once again to Bahrain, from China to Bahrain, like they said with the Malaysia to China. But they did say once Europe hits, they're looking to make some huge strides and gains, and I hope we can see that, because it will be nice to see them get back up, kind of slowly up the way to the grid. But sort of promising, even though they may have just been for a few seconds briefly, Fernando Alonso's on top, and also yes, it was a very different session. It's still lap time. It still happened for a little bit, So there are signs of McLaren improving a little bit there. But we on to Mercedes. Mercedes probably kind of the most interesting of this whole session, because it was kind of weird to see they weren't really showing up for free practice 1, and then free practice 2 they looked very strong. So maybe they're just kind of, they're just so good that they don't need to kind of bother with trying to even get a bit of data for free practice 1. They just thought, no, we won't run that much really. Hamilton once again complaining of overheating seat, which is a bit weird. He's complaining about that twice now in a row, Grand Prix. So I'm not too sure what's happening with him. I don't know if he needs to change his seat kind of, I don't know, whatever they make it out. They make it out of carbon fiber and Kevlar, but maybe he needs to change, the fireproof clothing he's got. I'm not too sure what's going on there. But Mercedes, a few little updates. They had a little vent on the top of the chassis, and that was just allowed to allow driver cooling. Don't be fooled. That is not any sort of air duct or anything like that, like the Red Bull or McLaren or Ferrari. That is simply just a little driving cooling, so the air will just go through, and that hole will just go straight into the cockpit kind of, what do you call it? The crash structure where the driver actually sits. So his legs will be just there. So it'll aid some driver cooling there. So just in the heat of the Bahrain Grand Prix. Just a nice little shot detail here of the Mercedes. This will be on the side pod, just on top where the driver's head is on the left and right of his head. That's where these vortex generators are. Just thought of a nice little detail to look at the Mercedes. And once again, just a nice little detail. Nothing new here. Just a little nice detail of the Mercedes kind of wings underneath the car. This is just under the front suspension there, and you can just see the complexity of it, and a lot of the aerodynamics of these cars are done underneath the car with these kind of turning vanes that really help them try and get air around underneath the car towards the side pods and whatnot. But that was Mercedes. Quiet free practice 1, but free practice 2 flexed their muscles and once again showing on top. But as I said, it might be interesting to see where they are, considering Ferrari did have generally much better tyre deg, but also a little bit better pace in the first few laps of their stints. But Rosberg was actually able to go a bit longer than the Ferraris did on their soft tyre stint, so it might equalise out. Maybe the Mercedes will eventually gain pace later on in the stint. So it's kind of a seesaw kind of game there. Moving on to Red Bull. Red Bull kind of had a new kind of brake duct. The shape kind of changed a little bit from kind of square, kind of flat, so it kind of curved in a little bit more. And also they had a little new vane on the front wing. But apart from that, no real major updates. Adrian Newey was there today in Bahrain sitting on the pit wall, so that was quite interesting to see. Maybe they're trying a few updates, or maybe Newey's just kind of overseeing things, because obviously they've had a torrid time so far. And braking here at Bahrain is very crucial, so they want to try and rectify any of the brake issues they had at China. Daniel Ricciardo finishing in 6th place in free practice 2, so very promising, because 6th place is very solid for Red Bull considering the time they've had so far. So that's pretty much Red Bull, just short and brief, short and sweet. Moving on to their sister team, Toro Rosso. Toro Rosso had a little update on the back of their car, so onto the exit, kind of the Coke bottle shape. Obviously, very tight packaging usually, but here with the Bahrain heat, they've had to open up the Coke bottle a little bit and make it a bit wider. So you can see where the Renault sign is, that whole bit of black carbon fiber bit. Obviously, usually would be painted in the blue and the red of Toro Rosso colours, but that is an update they've done from China to Bahrain. They haven't taken the car home to paint this part. They put it on the car. As you can kind of see, it's kind of being kind of fused on to the sideboard bit. So obviously that's why it's not kind of painted up. They haven't, most of the teams don't really take any of the parts back to the, you know, their bases. I mean, I believe even Manor, it was noticed as an interesting fact, the Manor car has never gone, any of the parts, anything of the Manor car have not gone back to the UK. They've all been on, you know, Australia to Malaysia to China to Bahrain. Some of the bigger teams can afford to bring freight back to the UK or back to their bases or back to Italy in Ferrari's case, and then maybe bring parts out. But here Toro Rosso just putting it onto the Bahrain spec car, widening the Coke bottle just to allow a bit more cooling there of the engine, because obviously it would be a disaster if you overheated, especially the Renault engine. Obviously they had some big problems in the last race. And finally, moving on to a tech update of Williams. This is not a huge update, but it's just a nice detail of what they've had since the beginning of the season. A nice serrated kind of turning vane just below the side pod inlet there. You can see on the top rightish, you can see where their inlet is, and then the kind of turning vanes all serrated off, and that just allows more air to come through, cuts a bit of drag. Here at Bahrain, obviously you don't want a lot of drag. There's quite a few straights here, quite important to try and get the top speed going, especially on the pit straight, which is very long and a nice entry onto it, so that's just got some drag. But that is it. That has been Let's Talk F1. Unfortunately, not too many updates, really, to talk about as a whole on Friday. Free Practice 1, as I said at the beginning of the video, very, very quiet. Practice 2 was a bit interesting, and once more, I'll reiterate, the Ferraris had a better tyre wear and a bit better pace on the first few laps of their stints compared to the Mercedes. So it seems that we could be on for a little fight. Maybe if the Mercedes make a bit of a mistake, maybe trip over themselves, if they have another scrap like they did last year, then definitely Ferrari could get in the mix. And also interesting, at the end of Free Practice 2, Sebastian Vettel lost his little bit of a front wing end plate there on Sergio Perez. As he came out of the pits, he had a brake failure, essentially, and I think some reports have been saying that the wheel wasn't properly put onto the front right, and that actually caused a bit of a failure there on the braking, and so he just couldn't stop the car. And obviously the pit lane, if you know it, Bahrain, just goes straight out into turn 1. Sergio Perez comes through, overtakes a car that's on track with him, and then he simply takes the apex because he believes Sebastian Vettel's going to slow down, and Vettel lost a bit of his front wing. Seemed like Vettel was a bit angry, but he was actually just a bit apologetic to Perez afterwards, and he actually went to go see him at his garage. So just a little thing there at the end of Free Practice 2. But that has been Let's Talk F1 2015, the Bahrain Grand Prix. Let me know, guys, in the comments below what your top 10 predictions are. Love reading them. Maybe not reply to any of them, but I do love reading them to try and get a gauge of what my subscribers think about the race and what will be happening. My top 3, I'm gonna go for it. I'm gonna say Nico Rosberg, I'm gonna say Lewis Hamilton then, and Sebastian Vettel. I think Rosberg, he might have it. More realistically, it might again just be Lewis Hamilton, Rosberg, and Vettel, but I think maybe Rosberg might just get him in first place with, you know, the pace he's had in Free Practice 2, and generally last year he got pole as well, so I think it's maybe a bit more of a comfortable track. In a kind of crazy world, my prediction would be Rosberg, Vettel, then Hamilton, because I do sort of hope that maybe the Ferraris do have a bit more pace to give, maybe the Mercedes trip over a little bit, and we could get a proper nice race to see a Ferrari maybe trying to get in the mix a bit, but probably more realistically it's going to be another 1-2 for Mercedes. Maybe Ferrari much closer than they were at China. Maybe, you know, you might see them finishing only a few seconds ahead of Sebastian Vettel or Kimi Raikkonen, but I still think it's going to be very difficult for them to overtake them. Certainly won't be anything like Malaysia, because Bahrain is a bit cooler at night time as well, and it looks like Mercedes are locked on and improved a little bit on their tyre wear. That's been Let's Talk F1. Give it a like if you did enjoy it. Share it with any of your fellow F1 fans. Really appreciate it, guys, because I'm doing this as a sort of a bit more of an intellectual kind of trying to teach you guys about Formula 1 just through my own kind of interest, and I'm sort of doing it as a thing that I can put on my CV for university. So any shares would be appreciated with your fellow Formula 1 fans and friends. But yeah, I've been Aarava. Give it a like if you did enjoy it. Subscribe when you're around here for weekly F1 content. And yeah, hope you enjoy the rest of the day, and hope you enjoy the race on Sunday.